the day of the big blizzard 2 years ago was the day she went into labor. I remember it really well.
It was really exciting and scary all at the same time.
He was born happy, healthy. Everything went very well.
Yeah.
We brought him home, everything normal to meet his brothers.
He was sleeping, eating, doing all the normal early baby stuff.
And then not quite 2 weeks, we noticed he was tired all the time. He slept all day, didn't eat much. By that evening, he wouldn't sleep and was up crying all night.
He was screaming, and he got really cold.
Starting to turn blue. So we threw him in the car and took him to the emergency room. And they actually called an ambulance. They couldn't do much for him, so they called the Panda EMS to come get him and take him to Children's.
So when Panda came, it was really intense. I rode with him to the hospital, and I was in the emergency room with Ewan. And there were just so many people.
When Ewan first came to the hospital, he was a couple of weeks old, and he came to us in what we call shock. Shock is when the heart function can no longer support the function of the body. So your kidneys and liver are initially most affected. Your lab numbers become very abnormal. Some people might get swollen. They get very cool. Their pulses become weak. So he required a breathing machine as well as several IV medications to help support his heart function.
We were at Children's for 2 weeks, and they were able to kind of get him set up so that he was just on a couple medications, and he was doing really good for a long time.
He came home right around the end of February.
The summer seemed good.
And then about the time school year started last year.
He wasn't eating as well.
He started to not grow as well. He came back to see me a little sooner than planned, and at that time, unfortunately, his heart function had worsened. His function was such that we did know he needed to be readmitted and was restarted on some of the same IV heart medicines he was on when he first presented at 2 weeks of age. Unfortunately, this time, those medications by themselves were not enough. He started getting sicker and required more and more care. He required being placed back on the machine for breathing support as well as ECMO, which supports the heart and lung function mechanically. You can't be on that machine for a long period of time, so ultimately, after further discussion, he was placed on something called a Berlin heart, which is a long-term mechanical device that helps support people that have poor heart function.
The prognosis was that once that went on, the only way forward was going to have to be a heart transplant. I guess it changed somehow in my mind from the worst case scenario to the thing that was going to save him. The weekend stay turned into 9 months in the hospital.
Yeah. We were kind of starting to come to terms with that. This was the way our life was going to be.
There's not a perfect formula or way to know if you're going to find a matching blood type and size donor in the right amount of time. Unfortunately, about 15% of people waiting on the transplant list die waiting. And 20 people on average die every day waiting for an organ transplant.
In June, I was there for my day with him and got ready to leave in the evening, as always. And as I was leaving, my phone rang. And it was Dr. Blake, and she asked me to come back up. And I went back in, and Dr. Blake was in there and told me that they found a heart.
Yeah.
We did finally receive an offer that was from a good-sized donor that matched him well. And so he went to the operating room, and over the course of probably 10 to 12 hours was kind of disconnected from his mechanical support device. And then his new heart was placed. He was able to come off the breathing machine after surgery within just a few days, and was quickly kind of trying to get back to where he had been before surgery.
Honestly, after the transplant, everybody, especially us, were just amazed at how fast he bounced back.
We're only there for about another month after he had his transplant before we came home.
It took a lot of people to get us here, between our families and our friends, helping with the other boys, staff at the hospital.
They were always thinking of him, even when they weren't working.
A lot of his nurses would come check on him when they weren't even scheduled to work.
It was really hard for me to go home at night, but eventually I did. And one of the nights that was a little harder for me was New Year's. Keith, one of Ewan's absolute favorite people, did a whole like photo shoot, and it was so sweet. He texted them to me like, "Oh, he's having a great time. We're singing and dancing," and it made the nights a lot easier, knowing that people were there for him.
All the people just amazing. I mean, the family of the donor. There's never going to be any words that would express how thankful I am for the choice they made.
I can't imagine what families go through that have to make a decision to donate. It was the most overwhelming feeling to know that we had gotten an offer. It's just indescribable the way it's changed our lives.
You're obviously very excited for your patient and their family. They've been waiting a long time. You're equally sad, though, for the donor family that's had to make that choice, but grateful to them as well for making the choice. My hope is that, Ewan goes on to live a long, healthy life and that he and his donor live that life together.
Thank you for everything,
Yeah.
for getting up and making those decisions, to putting somebody else in a spot where they could thrive. Because when I see my son, that's what I see. He's thriving.